Welcome to the Forward Miami Show. For those of you that don't know what Forward Miami is, we're a local nonprofit and we specialize with diversity and inclusion issues. I'm your host. My name is Damian Pardo, and to my left is JC. He's on the board of Forward Miami and a social media influencer. It is our great pride to introduce the mayor of Miami, Francis Suarez, who's with us today. Welcome, Mayor Suarez.
Thank you, Damian and JC. It's a pleasure and an honor to be with both of you. You guys have done so much for this community, and I look forward to continuing to work with you to make sure that Miami is the most diverse and inclusive city in America.
Yes. Well, the first thing I have to tell you is my godparents, who are your dad's godparents, would be very, very proud of you, especially the way you handled the pandemic issues. You really broke away from, the Dade County mayor, from the governor. You stuck to the science and the medical facts, and you led us, people in the city of Miami, really through a clear path. And I first wanted to start with your comments about that and where you see us with the pandemic.
Well, first of all, thank you. It's, for me, sometimes I get myself in trouble because I just tell the truth and I try to be honest, look at the facts and make decisions that I think are the best decisions for our residents. The pandemic was very difficult because it challenged elected officials to make two very difficult decisions: either shut things down to protect people or keep things open, which protects people, but also helps save jobs as well, which creates, a reduction in economic suffering. So that was very, very difficult. I think we're coming out of this pandemic. Obviously, we're vaccinating people at a very, very high rate. Pretty much anybody at any age that's an adult that can get vaccinated with essentially no wait time right now, and we urge people to do that. I'm about to get my second shot. Just had mine a couple weeks ago, and I'm about to get my second shot shortly. Feel great. There was no issues related to that. Obviously, I was second person to get COVID in this community, so it really taught me a lot and put me in a
patient zero.
Yeah, I was basically. So it basically allowed me to empathize with those who were inevitably going to get it later. And so, I think the city is hot right now. We're the envy of the world. And it's exciting to be in Miami and to be its mayor at this moment.
And what do you think about just generally, and this being one of the issues, COVID-19, the polarization that we see here in Miami-Dade County between the parties and among the community?
I've always tried to stick by the statement that was told to me by a good friend of mine, the mayor of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Bill Peduto. He said, Mr. Mayor, in America, there's three parties. There's Republicans, there's Democrats, and there's mayors, and I think what that means is we look at life differently. We look at life as a problem solution framework. We try to avoid the things that divide us, and we try to focus on the things that unite us. And on the things that divide us, we focus on, if there's a problem, let's try to solve it. Let's forget about who's responsible for it. Let's forget about, let's not put it through a partisan lens before we try to answer the problem. Let's just focus on the solution. And I think that's why mayors across America are gaining in prominence, and a lot of them are getting national profiles.
And do you think you differ from, the rest of the Republican Party? I mean, obviously, you take kind of a middle of the road stance, which is great. Obviously, you're a solutions-driven individual, but just given kind of the political climate, there's still a lot of divisiveness. Like, where do you see yourself in relation to the Republican Party?
For me, when I was 18 years old, I registered to be a Republican, and it was at the time, the party that Reagan had just come out of being the president, and George Bush, the father, and a party that was supposed to stand for limited government, low taxation, strong national defense. It was a party, frankly, I thought of immigrants in many ways, because it was a party of the American dream. And it was a party that believed in the private sector and the private sector's ability to innovate, create jobs, and create prosperity in America. And it was also a party of liberty. I think we always have to look to those principles and sort of grade ourselves against that checklist and see whether or not we're straying from that, and then make course corrections.
I have a question about being a Cuban American in Miami. For me, sometimes as a Cuban American, it's frustrating because I'll give you an example. Movimiento San Isidro, the MSI movement, is a movement from the left in Havana that's rebelling against the regime. It's something that lots of people in this community, including the broader media, the Democratic Party, BLM, any socially progressive social justice action group should be involved with. And I was wondering what your thoughts were about that. How can we get some leadership to raise the awareness on this issue? Because human rights is human rights. And right now it's a dire situation in Havana.
You've been very vocal on that, Damian, and I commend you for your voice on this issue. First of all, oftentimes there's a disconnect, and we're not talking about these issues. So a lot of people may not even know what Movimiento San Isidro is. So just the fact that you've introduced it into the conversation is important to elevate the movement and the people who are suffering in Cuba as a result of the movement. I think secondly, we have to understand what we're talking about, which is we have a government in Cuba that is a systematic violator of human rights. This is not a Republican thing. This is not a Democrat thing. This is not a liberal, conservative. This is a human rights, social justice thing, right? We see when we see people's human rights being violated here, we speak up. We feel compelled to speak up, right? And it should be no different. And frankly, it shouldn't be partisan. I think the biggest problem that I see oftentimes in America is that we feel that every issue has to be partisan. It doesn't. There's a lot of issues that don't have to be partisan. For example, immigration for me doesn't have to be a partisan issue. It's an economic issue. Climate, is an issue that I think should be looked at as a national security issue, not a partisan issue. If we have food shortages in other parts of the world, guess what's going to happen? We're going to have wars. And if we have wars, guess what can happen? We can have a world war. And a world war in today's day and age is extremely dangerous because the instruments of destruction that countries have are things that could wipe out all of humanity. So, we have to look at these issues a little bit differently so that we contextualize them in a way that doesn't divide us.
Absolutely. I know, we were talking the other day with your neighborhood and talking a little bit about climate since you raised it. It's pretty bad. You're in Edgewater and
I'm in Edgewater. It sprinkles and my parking lot gets flooded. Even when it doesn't rain, you see puddles and flooding, and it's pretty incredible how we really do feel like we're going to be underwater here pretty soon. Where do you stand on that? What's kind of your thoughts on action plans? I know also if you want to talk about the action plan you just released on Earth Day, you can speak on that as well.
Right, and I think that's a great time to talk about it. On Earth Day, we did a couple of things that were very important. The first thing we did was we issued our climate neutrality plan, our carbon neutral plan. So the city of Miami is pledging its carbon neutrality in conformity with C40, so that we can be carbon neutral by 2050. And reduce greenhouse emissions by 65% by 2038. So we are aggressively pursuing a climate neutrality plan that we hope to exceed those benchmarks. The second thing we did, and this goes to your point, JC, is we unleashed finally our stormwater master plan. Our stormwater master plan had been in design since 2012. We hadn't updated it and didn't take into account sea level rise. It didn't take into account what we call rain bombs, which are more intense than usual rainfall. And so our whole stormwater system, like in your neighborhood, is completely inadequate. So we've realized that we have the $200 million Miami Forever bond. We're a few cities in America that actually has real resources. And we're hoping that the infrastructure plan from the White House and from President Biden passes so that we have more resources. And we're actually thankful that a Republican-led legislature in Florida is hopefully going to pass its budget with some funding for some of these issues. So it's become a bipartisan issue, and that's something that I'm very proud of.
Another thing I wanted to raise, just as a community issue, is the racial divide, which seems, because of the polarization, to get worse as time goes on in many ways, particularly seeing as a Cuban American, oftentimes the entire racist thing because someone voted Republican or someone, it just seems that there's a lot of shades of bias, and racist is like the worst. And when it's being thrown or used in certain situations, it hurts the community. I think that's just my personal opinion, but I don't know as a leader in this community how you feel about that and how you would move toward fixing it or helping it.
Well, I think that the guilty verdict in the George Floyd trial was something that was important and necessary for healing some of the wounds that are always opened up when we see a situation like what we saw with the officer Chauvin, who mercilessly stepped on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and didn't let him breathe until he died. The cry for justice is one that it needs to be listened to. And I think, we have great officers. I think we just recruited a great police chief who believes in holding officers accountable. And I think that's a big part of it, right? If people feel safe in their country, if they feel safe in their city, I think, that's a big part of the solution. The other part is we have to make sure that there's what I call equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome, but equality of opportunity. Yes. And equality of opportunity means investing strategically in funding for educational opportunities for youth and upskilling for adults, so that all members of our community, no matter what ethnic background they come from, have an equal opportunity to be successful in our modern day economy. And that's something that we're being very intentional about. Today I did a Cafecito Tech Talk with the Center for Black Innovation. And we want to make sure that this tech renaissance that we're seeing in Miami, this tectonic shift, is something that all Miamians can benefit from.
And the new chief, can you tell us a little bit about him and his hiring?
Yeah, I mean, we were able to get, sort of the Michael Jordan of police chiefs. We were able to get somebody who was the president of the Major Cities Chiefs Association. He was chief. He was a 3-time chief, right? So it's hard to get someone like that, to recruit somebody like that. And he was also chief of a department, the 5th largest city in America. The size of the entire city of Miami was the size of his department. So we got an incredible person who happens to be Cuban, which I think is important because it's someone who can understand this community, can integrate into the community quickly. And is someone who I think what I love about him is that he inspires his troops, but he's certainly not shy. And he's someone who will hold officers accountable. And so that I think is important because it sends the right message to our community that we have someone who cares about every member of our community.
I'd like to touch on also, what happened in Miami Beach. You mentioned that, Miami is hot right now. Obviously, we touch on race because a lot of the media was sensationalizing, the black folk that came down and partied during spring break. A lot of people think that it was, mishandled. How do you feel about what had happened during spring break, and how would you have handled it?
Well, it's kind of a long answer. I'll try to condense it because, like many of you, I grew up here. I was born and raised in Miami. So I remember South Beach when it was actually South Beach.
Yeah.
Right? When there were 20, 30 nightclubs on Washington. And I think part of the problem is, and I don't blame it on the current mayor because this really precedes him, is, his predecessors were very anti-business. And so, a lot of those nightclubs that were on Washington closed. All of them closed, actually. There's no nightclubs in Washington anymore. Mm-hmm. So whereas before, and any week, whether it's Urban Week or whether it's Memorial Day or anything like that, spring break, people would be in South Beach, but they would be inside nightclubs, right? And if you had a knucklehead that started a fight, the bouncers kicked them out, they would get arrested, and that would be the end of it. But everything happened inside. And so I think they made a strategic mistake by going away from that business model, right? And so what happens is now the reputation of South Beach as a party town is still there, but the venues are not there. So you go to South Beach, and all of a sudden, there's no place to do anything, right?
That's interesting.
There's Live, and I don't know if Opium is still even open. You know what I mean? So Story. So there's 2 clubs in South Beach. So everyone goes, oh, we're going to go to South Beach, but there's nothing to do there. So you get there, there's nothing to do. All of America's there because it's the only place that's open, right? And what's going to happen? You crowd a bunch of people together. People get anxious. They're not happy. There's fights, and then there's cameras, and then we become sort of a laughing stock. So by contrast, in Miami, you have 5 a.m. liquor sales, and in some areas you have 24-hour liquor sales. 0 incidents, not one arrest, not one fight, nothing happening outside. So when you're pro-business and you let the business and private sector community create innovation and businesses that cater to people, you don't have an issue. When government is intrusive and is too trying to engineer things, you end up having problems. It happened in the Grove. Grove went from 5 a.m. liquor license to 2 a.m. It killed the Grove for 15 years. The Grove died completely. Yeah. Now it's coming back. Thank God it's renaissancing. But for many, many years, the Grove was dead.
You have done a great job, by the way, with tech and tech issues, and the whole Elon Musk with building tunnels under Miami, and so I think it's giving us a lot of hope as well, including a lot of communities in it, the Black community, the Latino Hispanic community. I mean, really reaching out to try to make this a global city with a tech focus. How are we doing?
We're crushing it. We're crushing it. We are the envy of the world. We are bringing the best people from New York and from Silicon Valley. They're fleeing cities that don't appreciate them, and they're fleeing cities that overtax them. And we want to keep taxes low. We want to keep people safe, and we want them to be appreciated, and we want them to have the best quality of life. Nobody that I've known, not even Elon Musk, has figured out how to live yesterday again.
Yeah.
So until someone figures that out, right? Until someone figures that out, you've got to live in the best place that you can find. And I think Miami is increasingly winning in that competition. We're going to build a beautiful $100 million linear park in the underlying. We're the only city in the world that has Formula One now in all the major sports. We have all the cultural offerings, science museums, brand new, art museum, Art Basel, Winter Music Conference, food and wine festival. I mean, it's just incredible the kind of activities that we have here.
Yeah, and I think historically, you're kind of the most like innovative, maybe most contemporary mayor that we've had. I mean, you use social media a lot. I don't know who's managing your social media, but you do it well. And you're known as like the pretty boy, like you're known as the good-looking like mayor, and a lot of that
such stress.
And Damian knows about being a pretty boy, so he gets it.
Right.
He gets it. But what's
I have some white hairs.
What's
you need a magnifying glass?
What's the thought process in like using, being innovative, using tech and social media to get to a younger demographic and bring these entrepreneurs and these businesses here to Miami?
Well, let me tell you that I feel very blessed, because I feel like not only am I the mayor of the best city on the planet, but I feel like I'm the mayor of the best city of the planet at the right moment in my life, right? Because if I would have been the mayor 10 years earlier, I probably wouldn't have been mature enough. And if I would have been the mayor 10 years later in my life, I probably wouldn't see some of these trends happening and wouldn't be able to capitalize on them. So it's funny. I came from Qatar a couple of weeks ago, and the Emir of Qatar, basically the king, is 40 years old. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia is 36. You know what I mean? So, what we're seeing is global leadership in our age demographic. And the reason why that bodes well for cities is because, again, you're mature enough to make tough choices and have enough, sort of battle scars from, in my case, 12 years of public service. But at the same time, you also have the vision to be able to promote and get ahead of new technologies. And we've tried to do that in Miami with crypto. You know what I mean? You have the FTX that just did a $200 million naming rights deal with the county as a result of my involvement in crypto. Now we're hopefully going to be able to pay for county taxes in crypto and city fees in crypto and pay our employees in crypto. Amazing. We want to be cutting edge of great companies. And, for us, it's about our families. It's about, our children, our cousins, our nephews, our nieces, and their children, and the ability for them to be able to study here, not have to leave, this be the most competitive place in the world, and then they come back here and get high-paying jobs.
Makes sense. What about development? Speaking of, coming back and making it a great big city, it is sometimes a struggle with some of the buildings that are rising up on Biscayne and the sky view that gets lost. I mean, the other day on US 1, I went by that Ponce building, and you can see that thing from far away. And if you're in traffic and you're already stressed out, that thing made me 10 times more stressed out, because the sky is gone, right? And then if you're going to sit there in 15 minutes of traffic and you have nothing but a brick thing to look at, it's just, how do you balance that in your role?
It's tough because we're growing by leaps and bounds. We have the ability, by the way, in the city of Miami. I think you were saying, did you say Ponce was a building?
Yeah,
Ponce?
that was Gables. Yeah.
So in the city of Miami, we have the ability to grow 10x. So in other words, 10 times greater than what we are. So if you can imagine how big we are now, I mean, we have the ability within our zoning landscape to grow by that much. So that creates all kinds of issues. One of them is, of course, transportation, which is why I thought going to Las Vegas and studying the Boring Company solution was important because we definitely and desperately need an inexpensive transportation system that can get us around quickly and inexpensively. Secondly, with growth, the one thing that I'm really hearing over and over again is our educational system. We need great schools, obviously at the university level and engineering, but at the high school level for all these people that are coming from outside and want to make sure they can get a premium education.
I think it would be, we would be remiss if we didn't mention, gentrification. I think, we've had guests on our show that are worried about like places like Little Haiti and stuff where a lot of people are being, moved from their hometown and where they've, were born and grew up. Like, how do you feel about that? And how do you balance that as well with development?
Well, it's so tough. It's such a tough issue because, you have these classic neighborhoods like Little Havana and Little Haiti and Overtown, and they're finite spaces, right? They're not infinite spaces, even though they feel infinite sometimes in terms of our culture and in terms of their brand, but they're finite. And there's two aspects of it. One is we're very intentional about in Overtown, for example, as an Overtown CRA board member, we created $60 million of brand new affordable housing in Overtown to try to keep Overtown residents there. The second thing that we did was we spent about $50 million in rehabbing already existing affordable housing. With our Miami Forever plan, we have $100 million that we're spending on affordable housing throughout the city. We've already leveraged the first $10 million to do about $200 million worth of projects, 722 units, and we did about $4 million for what we call naturally occurring affordable housing, which is people who live in homes in areas like Liberty City, right, in single-family residential homes that need to do resiliency upgrades to their homes, can't afford to. So we're giving them the money, granting them the money, so long as they invested in resiliency things like new roofs, impact windows, things like that, and they don't have to pay it back if they don't sell their house within 10 years. So we're allowing them to upgrade their house, stay in their house, which stems gentrification. But it's very, very difficult because like in the Grove, for example, and I use the example of Miss Jackson, who is my good friend from high school, PJ Brown's mother, who lives in the Grove. She inherited her house from her family that may have paid $10,000 for the house. If somebody or $800,000 for a lot, what are you gonna do? You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing the government can do there. You know what I mean? Like, if she wants to take that money, retire to Homestead, pay $150,000, and sit on $600,000, there's only so much that government can do. So I think sometimes we have to be fair and honest with people about what are the limitations of government. We can help on gentrification. We can, do the things that, be creative and do the kind of programming that I'm talking about. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if a willing homeowner wants to sell to a willing seller, there's nothing that government can do about that. And that's it forces that unfortunately, gentrification, and it happens, and it's real.
Well, good. I'm glad I asked.
No, me too. I mean, I wonder how places like New York did it. I mean, you hear about price protection and stuff like that, but has the city explored anything like that?
Well, I'll give you an example of how screwed up New York is compared to Miami, right? So in Miami, you can get an apartment in downtown in the Omni area unsubsidized. In other words, we didn't subsidize. We just didn't put $1 of subsidy into the apartment. $1,450 right now. Go to Manhattan and try to find an unsubsidized apartment, you're going to pay $3,600. So I don't know what kind of affordable they have, or I don't know what kind of stemming they've done, but I can tell you that the cost of living there is 3 times higher than it is in Miami. So, and in San Francisco, it's the same thing. I can tell you.
Says it how it is.
No, absolutely. Listen, one of the things is you're doing a great job. You're all over the place. Like you said, Miami's hot. You're up for re-election. What are the future plans, future sites?
Well, first of all, for me, I want to continue to grow this economy because I've spent 11 years of my public service life focused side of the equation, focusing on affordable housing and transportation, things like that. For the first time, I have the distinct pleasure of being able to focus on the income side. And so for me, that gets me excited to know that if I can create one high-paying job for one of my Miamians, that's not only going to affect their life, that's going to affect their children's education. That's going to give their children a better opportunity to be successful in their life, and their children are going to be successful. So it is a multi-generational impact, which is why I talk about tech so much. People are like, oh, why you spend all your time talking about tech? Why do you do that? You know, that's the reason. The reason why is because I don't want abuelitos and abuelitas to have their nietecitos leave for college and not come back. I don't want people to have to live in affordable housing. Look, affordable housing is something you do because people unfortunately have to live in it. But wouldn't it be better if we just created jobs where people could live and not have to live in affordable housing? I mean, isn't that the real goal? And I think for me, that's what excites me. And so trying to create this generational shift and creating an equitable city is something that I think could differentiate us from all the cities in the country and make us the most exciting city in the world.
And if you had one thing, you had a magic wand and you were able to just change it, what would you change in Miami?
Wow. If I had one magic wand that I would just change, this was going to really get me in trouble.
I can't wait.
I would make every public official make decisions based on what's in the best interest of our residents and not based on ego or personal relationships, or you know what I mean, or I don't like this person, so I'm going to teach this person a lesson. That to me has been probably the most disappointing thing I've had to experience in my public service career. If we can get away from that and just focus on doing the work, I promise you there's no city that can touch us.
Yeah, name them. Who's that? Who does that? Name them.
We want names.
That's where I draw the line.
No. Just kidding. Mayor Suarez, what a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us. We welcome you to come back again. You can count on us. I hope Movimiento San Isidro gets out there and there's more. If people don't know what that is, I hope they reach out. Yeah, learn about that, because this is one issue, like there are many right now, where we can come together as a community.
100%. I don't know if you've had Osvaldo Paya's daughter, Rosa Maria Paya, on your show, but if you haven't, that's like the best person to have on your show. She's our age. She, the Project Varela in Cuba that was led by her father, who was unfortunately a martyr, was picked up, and she calls it Cuba Decide, and it's all about having free and fair elections in Cuba. I would highly recommend her as a guest because she's someone that can really, really articulate the movement very well.
Thank you. I have reached out, and I have a Cuba Decide t-shirt, polo that I try to wear.
He wears all the time.
I wear as much as possible, but I think, I just think this is a bridge issue, right? Any bridge issue in our community, I think helps us solve, because we learn our stories. We come together a little bit more. I just want to thank you again, and the best of luck. We are going to be watching. We're big cheering you on.
Yes, absolutely.
Love you guys. Be good.
Love you. Good luck.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Well, I think that went well. No. I think that went well.
We're still here.
Yeah, but that was good with
so obviously we're done, and we will see you next.
You want to have like
We should.
We will see you next Friday.
Thank you, guys.
See you next Friday. Thank you for watching.